On the 6th of April 2019, Khartoum, Sudan, Omar al-Bashir had just been removed from power. 30 years of dictatorship, gone in a single morning. The cameras showed the crowds, millions of people, singing in the streets. That is the image the world received. Now look at what the cameras missed. 3 days before the crowds gathered, $130 million moved out of the presidential palace. And within 48 hours of al-Bashir's arrest, the weapons his regime used for 3 decades, the armored vehicles, the artillery systems, the surveillance equipment, none of it disappeared. It was transferred to the next set of hands. 5 years later, those same weapons are being used in one of the deadliest civil wars on the continent. Sudan, 2023. Over 16,650 confirmed dead, millions displaced, cities turned to rubble. The guns are still arriving, and the companies selling them are still posting record profits.
I am a forensic investigator. Today, we are not watching the battlefield, we are auditing the boardroom. You are watching Historic Capital. This is the dossier on the arms syndicate. Let me show you something. An arms company does not want peace. Peace is a supply chain disruption. Think about that carefully. In a stable country, a government buys weapons once, stores them, maintains them, rarely uses them. That is a bad business model for a defense contractor. But in a country at war, the equation changes completely. Weapons are destroyed in combat. They must be replaced. Ammunition is fired. It must be restocked. Equipment breaks down. It must be serviced. Every month of active conflict generates a new purchase order. Now look at the numbers. In 2024, the world's 100 largest defense companies posted combined revenues of $679 billion, a record high. In the same year that conflicts in Gaza, Ukraine, Sudan, and the Sahel were all burning simultaneously, the headline said, "War is at its worst." The balance sheet said, "Business is at its best." Now look at who controls this business. Between 2020 and 2024, the United States alone accounted for 43% of all global arms exports. According to SIPRI, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, the top 5 exporters in that period were the United States, France, Russia, China, Germany. Together, those 5 nations controlled 74% of every major weapon that crossed a border anywhere on Earth. Now stay with me. 3 of those 5 nations are permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, the same body that votes on peacekeeping missions, the same body that authorizes arms embargoes, the same body that issues statements condemning civilian casualties in African conflicts. The men who vote on whether to send peacekeepers to Sudan are the same men whose governments approve weapons sales to the parties fighting in Sudan. You see the pattern? This is not a conflict of interest. This is the architecture. To understand how the syndicate operates in Africa, we need to open a specific file. South Africa, 1999.
The apartheid era had ended 5 years earlier. A new democratic government was in power, and they needed to modernize their military. The arms companies arrived immediately. British arms manufacturer BAE Systems secured contracts to supply Hawk aircraft and Gripen fighter jets. The contracts were together worth over 15 billion rand. French arms company Thales, which is partially owned by the French government, secured an additional 2.6 billion rand contract for naval combat suites. On paper, this was a legitimate procurement process. Now read the contract behind the contract. British authorities subsequently found that BAE Systems had paid £115 million in what they described as commissions through at least 8 different entities, mostly held in offshore bank accounts to secure the South African deal. The Serious Fraud Office viewed those commissions as suspected bribes. BAE Systems denied paying bribes. A financial advisor named Shabir Sheikh was convicted in a South African court of arranging annual payments of 500,000 rand to Jacob Zuma, then the deputy president of South Africa, routed through Thales. The court found those payments were intended to purchase Zuma's protection for Thales against investigation. Zuma later became president of South Africa. Thales later received further contracts. In 2011, a French court fined Thales 630 million euros for bribery in an unrelated contract in Taiwan. Not for stopping, only for Taiwan. BAE Systems paid a settlement. Nobody was imprisoned. The South African contracts remained in place. Look at this carefully. The fine is not a punishment. The fine is a business expense, calculated into the profit margin in advance. The South African arms deal is not an isolated scandal. It is a documented template. Step 1. Identify a government that needs to buy weapons. Step 2. Locate the decision makers. Step 3. Create a financial relationship with those decision makers. Step 4. Secure the contract. Step 5. If discovered, pay the settlement and retain the contract. This process has been repeated across the continent with different names, different currencies, the same structure.
Now let me show you the most sophisticated tool the syndicate uses to protect itself. The arms embargo.
An arms embargo is a legal instrument issued by the United Nations. It declares that no weapons may be sold to a specific country or conflict zone. It is presented to the public as the wall that stops wars from being fueled. Follow the weapons. In February 2011, the United Nations imposed a full arms embargo on Libya. No weapons, from anyone to anyone. In March 2021, the United Nations panel of experts released their official assessment of that embargo. They described it, in their own documented language, as totally ineffective. They recorded violations by multiple state actors. Between January and April 2020 alone, the UAE reportedly dispatched over 150 flights carrying military equipment to armed factions inside Libya. The flights were tracked by satellite. The embargo was active. The flights continued. Think about that. The weapons that were legally exported to Libya before the embargo are now documented in Mali, in Niger, in Sudan, in the Central African Republic. A weapon does not know its embargo. A weapon goes where the money takes it. Now look at Sudan specifically. In 2023, civil war erupted between the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces. Amnesty International documented weapons manufactured in China, Russia, Turkey, the UAE, flowing into the conflict through Libya, Chad, Eritrea, and Ethiopia. Each border crossing was a transaction. Each transaction involved a logistics company, a freight forwarder, a shell company registered in a jurisdiction that does not ask questions. In December 2023, the United States government officially declared that members of the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces were committing war crimes and ethnic cleansing. Both sides continued to receive weapons after that declaration. The embargo is not a wall. The embargo is a legal document that creates paperwork while the shipments continue.
Now let me tell you what is going to happen next. Not speculation, pattern recognition.
Every conflict that has followed this structure in the last 40 years has moved through the same sequence. Stage 1. Political instability destabilizes a government. Stage 2. Arms imports accelerate from multiple suppliers. Stage 3. The conflict displaces populations and disrupts agriculture. Stage 4. A humanitarian crisis is declared. Stage 5. Reconstruction contracts are issued. Look at the pattern. The same financial ecosystem that profits from the war, profits from the humanitarian response to the war, and profits again from the reconstruction contracts after the war ends. 3 revenue streams, 1 conflict. Based on documented patterns in Libya, Sudan, and the DRC, the regions currently experiencing the highest volume of incoming arms are also the regions where reconstruction contract discussions are already being prepared in Western capitals. The crisis is the investment thesis.
To understand why governments allow this, you need to understand one mechanism. It has a name: the revolving door.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
A Western defense minister spends 5 years inside government. He controls which companies receive export licenses. He decides which countries are approved to receive weapons. Then he leaves government. Within months, he is sitting on the board of a defense contractor. He brings something more valuable than any weapon. He brings access. He knows which officials are still inside the ministry. He knows which arguments work. He knows which calls to make. This is legal. This is continuous. This happens across the United States, the United Kingdom, and France. In the United States, this network has a specific name. President Dwight Eisenhower, a five-star general and former Supreme Allied commander, warned about it publicly in his farewell address in January 1961. He called it the military-industrial complex. He said its influence must never be allowed to endanger democratic processes. That was 1961. In 2024, the five largest U.S. defense companies, Lockheed Martin, RTX, Northrop Grumman, BAE Systems, and General Dynamics, posted combined U.S. arms revenues exceeding $334 billion. To protect that revenue, they employ thousands of registered lobbyists in Washington, London, Paris, and Brussels. Those lobbyists draft the arguments used by politicians, who then stand in Parliament and explain why it is necessary to sell weapons to a government simultaneously under investigation for war crimes. The language is always the same: strategic partnership, regional stability, counter-terrorism cooperation. The translation is always the same. The contract is signed.
You might think this happens at a level that does not touch ordinary people. Open the full account. When an African government spends its national budget on imported weapons, it is spending money it does not have. It borrows it. The loan is denominated in US dollars or euros. The interest is paid to Western financial institutions. The weapons arrive. They are used. The conflict displaces farmers. The farmers stop producing food. The food supply contracts. The price of grain rises. The ordinary citizen who had no involvement in any procurement decision now pays more for bread. His child cannot attend school because the school is in a conflict zone. His family moves to a displacement camp. And in that camp, an NGO arrives, funded in several documented cases by the same Western governments whose companies sold the weapons that created the camp. The ecosystem profits from the crisis it created. But go deeper. Africa holds approximately 30% of the world's known mineral reserves. Cobalt, coltan, gold, uranium, lithium, the raw materials that power every electric vehicle, every smartphone, every advanced defense system sold by the companies we have been examining. A stable, sovereign Africa would mine those minerals and negotiate from a position of strength. An Africa in permanent conflict mines those minerals under duress, at suppressed prices, with no leverage and no alternatives. The wars do not only generate revenue from weapons sales, the wars keep the mineral prices suppressed and the extraction terms favorable. Think about that. Peace in Africa would be, for this ecosystem, a direct financial threat. We watch the images. The burning villages, the columns of displaced people, the children. And we call it tribal conflict. We call it political instability. We call it a humanitarian crisis. But instability does not manufacture itself. Instability has a supply chain.
The weapon that ignites the village was assembled in a factory in Birmingham or St. Cloud or Fort Worth. It was packed in a crate, loaded onto a ship, signed off by a ministry official, and at every step of that journey, someone issued an invoice and someone collected a payment. The soldier on the ground carries the weapon, but the weapon was financed by a bank in Paris, approved by a minister in Washington, delivered by a logistics company in Dubai, and the profit was recorded in a quarterly report that made shareholders in London very comfortable. The arms syndicate did not invent African conflict, it industrialized it. It built a system that converts the grief of an entire continent into a recurring revenue stream. And the system protects itself through embargoes that are not enforced, settlement fines that are calculated in advance, and revolving doors that keep the same people moving between government and the boardroom.
The arms syndicate did not invent African conflict. It industrialized it. This is not chaos. This is structure.
I am not going to tell you to be angry. Anger is not a strategy. Here is what strategic awareness looks like. When you see a conflict in Africa declared on the news, the first question is not who is fighting. The first question is who is supplying. Check the arms export data. SIPRI publishes it publicly every year. When you see an arms embargo announced, the second question is which country has already been documented violating the last embargo. The pattern tells you more than the press conference ever will. When you see a Reconstruction announcement after a conflict ends, the third question is is, which companies have already been awarded the preliminary contracts? Follow the money, understand the incentives, think before the crisis, not during it. That is where the leverage is. We have now opened two files, the xenophobia cartel, the arms syndicate. Both systems extract from the same continent. Both systems protect themselves through the same mechanisms. Both systems rely on the same condition to survive, that Africa remains fragmented, that African governments remain in debt, that African citizens remain focused on the crisis directly in front of them and not on the institution that designed it. There is one institution that sits above the battlefield and above the boardroom. It does not sell weapons, it sells something more powerful: debt.
The next file is called The Debt Trap: How the IMF and World Bank Keep Africa Permanently Broke. If you want us to open it, subscribe right now and leave a comment below. Which contract surprised you most? The South Africa arms deal? The Libya embargo violations? Or something else? Let us read the records together. You are watching Historic Capital. The truth is in the transactions. Follow the money.
Power is never given. It is taken, hidden, and controlled. This is Historic Capital.